Hypoxia is a condition where tissues in the body don't receive enough oxygen to sustain normal function. This oxygen deficiency can affect individual organs or the entire body. Let's look at what normal versus hypoxic oxygen levels look like in the blood. As you can see, normal blood oxygen levels typically range from 95 to 100%, while hypoxia begins when levels fall below 90%. Oxygen is transported throughout the body via red blood cells. These cells pick up oxygen in the lungs and deliver it to tissues throughout the body. In normal conditions, blood is well oxygenated, allowing sufficient oxygen delivery to all tissues. Oxygen is essential for cellular metabolism and energy production. Inside the mitochondria, oxygen is used in the final step of cellular respiration. This process, known as oxidative phosphorylation, produces the majority of ATP, the energy currency that powers all cellular functions. Without adequate oxygen, cells begin to malfunction. They switch to anaerobic metabolism, which is far less efficient at producing energy. As this continues, cellular processes break down, and eventually, if oxygen deprivation persists, cells will die. When the body detects hypoxia, it triggers compensatory mechanisms. The brain signals an increase in breathing rate, the heart pumps faster, and blood vessels dilate to maximize oxygen delivery to vital organs. In summary, hypoxia is a serious condition that disrupts cellular function, impairs organ performance, and can be life-threatening if severe or prolonged. In this section, we'll explore the 4 main types of hypoxia. Each type represents a different mechanism that prevents oxygen from reaching the cells and tissues of the body. These 4 types are hypoxemic hypoxia, anemic hypoxia, stagnant hypoxia, and histotoxic hypoxia. The first type is hypoxemic hypoxia, also known as altitude hypoxia. This occurs when there's a low partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood. This type of hypoxia is common at high altitudes, where the partial pressure of oxygen in the air is reduced. The alveoli in the lungs receive less oxygen to transfer to the bloodstream. Hypoxemic hypoxia can also result from respiratory diseases, airway obstruction, or any condition that prevents adequate oxygen from reaching the lungs and being absorbed into the blood. The second type is anemic hypoxia. This occurs when the blood cannot carry sufficient oxygen despite normal oxygen levels in the lungs. Anemic hypoxia is caused by a reduced amount of functional hemoglobin or a decreased red blood cell count. This limits the blood's oxygen-carrying capacity. This type of hypoxia is common in conditions such as anemia, blood loss, and carbon monoxide poisoning. Interestingly, oxygen saturation measured by pulse oximetry may appear normal, as the remaining hemoglobin is still saturated with oxygen. The third type is stagnant hypoxia, also called circulatory hypoxia. This occurs when blood flow is inadequate to deliver sufficient oxygen to the tissues. In stagnant hypoxia, the blood contains normal oxygen levels, but due to reduced circulation, tissues don't receive adequate oxygen. This can occur even when breathing and hemoglobin levels are normal. Common causes include heart failure, shock, blood pooling in the veins, and localized ischemia. The key issue is not a lack of oxygen in the blood, but rather the blood's inability to circulate effectively. The fourth type is histotoxic hypoxia. This occurs when cells cannot effectively use the oxygen that is delivered to them. In histotoxic hypoxia, oxygen transport to tissues is normal, but the cells cannot utilize the oxygen due to toxic effects on cellular metabolism. The mitochondria, which are the cell's energy factories, cannot process oxygen properly. This type of hypoxia is typically caused by toxins such as cyanide, which blocks cellular respiration, or by heavy alcohol consumption. Paradoxically, blood oxygen levels may appear normal or even elevated, as the oxygen remains in the bloodstream rather than being used by the tissues. Let's summarize the 4 types of hypoxia we've discussed. Hypoxemic hypoxia involves insufficient oxygen in the blood due to breathing problems or low environmental oxygen. Anemic hypoxia occurs when blood cannot carry enough oxygen due to hemoglobin or red blood cell deficiencies. Stagnant hypoxia results from inadequate blood circulation despite normal oxygen levels. And histotoxic hypoxia occurs when cells cannot utilize the oxygen delivered to them due to toxic effects on cellular metabolism. Understanding these different types of hypoxia is crucial for proper diagnosis and treatment, as each type requires a different therapeutic approach. At high altitudes, pilots and mountain climbers face a unique danger: hypoxia, or oxygen deprivation, due to decreased partial pressure of oxygen. The science is straightforward. As you ascend, air pressure decreases. While the percentage of oxygen remains constant at 21%, the reduced pressure makes it harder for oxygen molecules to enter your bloodstream. Supplemental oxygen becomes necessary at specific altitude thresholds. For aviation, the FAA requires pilots to use supplemental oxygen when flying above 12,500 feet for more than 30 minutes and continuously above 14,000 feet. For climbers, supplemental oxygen is typically used above 12,000 feet, becoming essential above 26,000 feet in the so-called death zone. One of the most dangerous aspects of hypoxia is cognitive impairment. As oxygen levels decrease, judgment and decision-making abilities deteriorate before physical symptoms become apparent. This creates a particularly hazardous situation because affected individuals often don't recognize their own impairment. This graph illustrates how cognitive function progressively declines with hypoxia, similar to how it deteriorates in conditions like dementia. The insidious nature of hypoxia means that by the time you recognize something is wrong, your ability to respond appropriately may already be compromised. Recognizing the symptoms of hypoxia is critical for survival at high altitudes. Early symptoms include headache, dizziness, fatigue, and shortness of breath. As hypoxia worsens, confusion, poor coordination, and blue discoloration of the skin may develop. Training to recognize these symptoms in yourself and others is essential for pilots and climbers. Doctors use several diagnostic tools to assess whether a patient is experiencing hypoxia. Pulse oximetry is a non-invasive method that measures the oxygen saturation level in the blood. The device clips onto a finger, earlobe, or toe and uses light to measure how much oxygen is bound to hemoglobin in the blood. Normal oxygen saturation is typically between 95 and 100%. Levels between 91 and 94% are considered borderline, while readings at or below 90% indicate hypoxia requiring intervention. Arterial blood gas testing is a more invasive but highly accurate diagnostic method. It involves drawing blood from an artery, typically in the wrist, to directly measure oxygen and carbon dioxide levels. Normal arterial oxygen pressure, or PaO2, ranges from 80 to 100 millimeters of mercury. In hypoxia, PaO2 falls below 80, with levels under 60 indicating moderate hypoxia and below 40 representing severe hypoxia requiring immediate intervention. Imaging studies like chest X-rays and CT scans help doctors identify the underlying causes of hypoxia. These images can reveal conditions such as pneumonia, pulmonary edema, blood clots, or lung collapse that may be restricting oxygen flow. To summarize, doctors diagnose hypoxia based on multiple indicators: a pulse oximetry reading below 90%, arterial oxygen pressure below 80 millimeters of mercury, physical signs like bluish discoloration, and imaging evidence of an underlying condition all help confirm the diagnosis. Early and accurate diagnosis of hypoxia is critical. It enables prompt treatment that can prevent tissue damage and organ dysfunction from oxygen deprivation. Chronic hypoxia, when the body experiences prolonged periods of insufficient oxygen, leads to several serious long-term complications. Pulmonary hypertension develops as blood vessels in the lungs constrict in response to low oxygen levels. This narrowing increases resistance to blood flow, creating persistently high pressure in the pulmonary circulation. The right side of the heart must work harder to pump blood through the constricted pulmonary vessels. This increased workload causes right ventricular hypertrophy, an enlargement of heart muscle, as shown here. Eventually, the heart cannot keep up with demand and begins to fail. The brain is particularly sensitive to oxygen deprivation. Chronic hypoxia can lead to memory problems, difficulty concentrating, reduced decision-making abilities, and over time, permanent neurological damage. Persistent oxygen deprivation damages multiple organ systems. Kidneys suffer reduced filtration capacity, the liver shows impaired metabolism and detoxification functions, and the cardiovascular system experiences accelerated atherosclerosis and vascular damage. The body attempts to compensate for chronic hypoxia. One mechanism is increased production of red blood cells, known as polycythemia. This adaptation allows more oxygen to be carried in the bloodstream, as shown in this comparison of normal blood versus polycythemic blood. Another compensatory mechanism is angiogenesis, the development of new blood vessels to improve oxygen delivery to tissues. While this process can initially help, it often leads to inefficient or abnormal vascular networks that may not function optimally. Despite these compensatory mechanisms, persistent hypoxia ultimately leads to progressive tissue damage and system failure. The body's adaptations may temporarily improve oxygen delivery, but they cannot fully overcome the effects of chronic oxygen deprivation. This results in a steady decline in function, diminishing quality of life, and potentially life-threatening complications. Prevention strategies are crucial for avoiding hypoxia and managing its effects. Let's discuss key preventive measures for hypoxia. These include proper management of underlying conditions, avoiding high altitudes without proper acclimatization, using supplemental oxygen when necessary, and smoking cessation. For those with chronic conditions causing hypoxia, pulmonary rehabilitation programs can significantly improve quality of life. These programs include exercise training, education on disease management, and techniques for breathing and energy conservation. Recognizing the early signs of hypoxia is crucial. Common symptoms include restlessness, headache, confusion, rapid heart rate, and breathing difficulties. Early recognition is critical for preventing serious complications. Understanding blood oxygen levels is important for managing hypoxia. Normal levels range from 95 to 100%. Levels between 91 and 94% are concerning, while levels at or below 90% are considered low and require medical attention. It's important to know when to seek medical attention. Contact a healthcare provider immediately if you experience persistent shortness of breath, blue discoloration of lips or skin, oxygen saturation below 90%, or confusion. Seek immediate emergency care for severe symptoms. With proper prevention and management strategies, the effects of hypoxia can be minimized and quality of life can be improved for those with chronic conditions.
If you enjoyed this video and would like to practice your understanding, go to MatEazy.com. There, you'll find this lesson outlined and divided, with a short quiz to see how well you really understood it. And if you're hungry for more, we've got piles of other topics for you to explore. Start learning easier. Visit MatEazy today.